Hey guys, tonight we're going to dive into something beautifully strange, how a quiet whisper in the dark can feel safer than silence. Picture this, you're lying in bed, lights out, the hum of your fan brushing against the stillness, and then you hear it. A voice, not loud, not urgent, just a whisper. And instead of jolting up in panic, your eyelids get heavier. Odd, right? You probably won't know this, but humans are biologically wired to find whispers calming. Not in the romanticized, candlelit dinner way, but in a deep, prehistoric survival kind of way. Your ancestors didn't have podcasts or ASMR channels. They had cave walls, close quarters, and very good reasons to keep their voices down after dark. Whispering meant everyone was safe enough not to scream. Before you settle in, feel free to like the video if it brought you a little peace, and if you'd like to join us again, we'd love to have you back. Subscribe when you're ready. No pressure, just rest. Share something if you feel like it. Let's slowly drift into tonight's quiet moments together. You trudge through your evening rituals, the toothbrush autopilot, the 10-minute phone scroll you swear won't become 20, and somewhere along the way, the air starts to change. Maybe it's the quiet, or maybe it's that strange, primal pull you feel when someone starts to whisper. Your ears perk up. Your breathing slows down just a little. You don't lean away, you lean in. That, right there, is the psychology we're unraveling. You see, whispering is not just a quirk of bedtime stories or lovers' secrets. It's an ancient behavioral adaptation. Back when humans lived in groups tightly packed for protection, loud noises at night could signal danger. But whispers? Whispers were reserved for moments of peace, for secret keeping, or soft communication when the rest of the world was asleep. Mainstream psychological theory says that we associate whispering with calm because of this early safety response. Your amygdala, the brain's little alarm bell, actually stays quieter when it hears a whisper than when it processes normal conversation. It's almost as if it says, "Oh good, if they're whispering, everything must be fine." That's the same mechanism that explains why you start to drowse off in a room full of hushed voices. There's even a concept in evolutionary psychology called vocal modulation for bonding, where softer voices are used to promote closeness without triggering a fight or flight reaction. Whispering became a kind of social cue, we're okay. No one's yelling. You can rest now. Now, here's your quirky tidbit. In some indigenous Australian cultures, whispering at night was reserved only for conversations with spirits or ancestors. They believed that speaking too loudly after dark could invite unwelcome energies. So whispering wasn't just calming, it was sacred. You weren't just being quiet, you were entering a different kind of space. There's also some speculative psychology about how whispering plays into your primal memory of being an infant. Remember that? Yeah, probably not. But your brain does. As a baby, you were held close, comforted by breathy lullabies and soft shushing sounds. Fast forward a few decades, and your nervous system still links those patterns of sound with safety and care. But not all scientists are fully convinced. Philosophers still argue whether this instinct is truly hardwired or if it's more of a learned behavior shaped by social norms. Some say whispering only feels relaxing because we've been conditioned to associate it with bedtime, therapy, and gentle moments, not because of any ancient biological wiring. Is it nature or nurture? The debate rolls on, like a tumbleweed of sleepiness drifting across your prefrontal cortex. Think about how many critical scenes in movies happen in whispers, confessions, secrets, reassurances. There's something about a whisper that gets past your mental defenses. You don't need to be on alert. You just listen. And you absorb. Funny enough, there's a reason why even animals respond to whispery sounds. Not in the same way you do, of course, but they tend to become still, even curious, rather than defensive. It's that universal principle of low-frequency noise as a non-threat. Even your dog knows the difference between, "let's go for a walk," and "good boy," said in a breathy voice. Now, not every whisper is calming. If you're watching a horror movie and someone starts whispering from behind a shower curtain, yeah, that's a different story. But that's the thing, context changes everything. In the right environment, your cozy room, your weighted blanket, your favorite sleepy playlist, a whisper doesn't signal danger. It signals permission to let go. The structure of a whisper also matters. It lacks the vocal cord vibration that regular speech has. That airy, friction-based sound rides differently in your auditory system. Less jarring. Less spiky. Smoother. Like sliding into silk sheets instead of a bed of Legos. Let's throw in a little oddball fact here. In the Middle Ages, monks often used whispering prayers during Vespers to calm their minds and avoid disturbing others. It wasn't just etiquette, it was believed the whisper helped focus the mind inward. Like sound becoming breath, and breath becoming thought. Whispering also changes the speaker. When you whisper, you slow down your speech. You pause more. You become aware of your breath. That mindfulness travels through the sound and is picked up by your listener. Even now, in this moment, as you listen to these soft words, your mind is mirroring the slow pace, the softer tones, and your body is responding in kind. So here we are. You're lying there, phone face up beside you, pillow just the right level of squish. The day has finally shut up. And in that quiet, a whisper reaches you. Not loud. Not demanding. Just present. And your brain, after all its spiraling, all its nonsense, says, "Ah. We're good now. Welcome to the science of feeling safe in the quiet. And trust me, this is just the beginning. You've made it past the entryway, past the gentle reminder that whispering signals safety. Now we go deeper. Tonight, you're going to explore what happens inside your brain when it hears a whisper. Not a sound in the room, not a siren outside, just a low, breathy voice curling softly into your ear. And your brain? It lights up in strange and fascinating ways. When someone whispers, your auditory cortex kicks into high gear, but not like when you hear normal speech. You see, your brain processes whispers as less predictable and more intimate. That combination is weirdly potent. Imagine listening to someone tell you a secret versus someone shouting across a parking lot. Your brain doesn't just hear those two things differently, it feels them differently. In a whisper, the lack of volume forces your auditory system to lean in, to sharpen its focus. And the areas responsible for attention, like your anterior cingulate cortex, fire up as if to say, "Hold on, this is important." At the same time, your brain doesn't register the usual high-frequency spikes that come with louder speech. So the amygdala, the part that goes on red alert, stays in its lounge chair, sipping herbal tea, totally unbothered. That contrast, heightened attention without threat, is where relaxation lives. You're mentally present, but not tense. Engaged, but peaceful. You're essentially tricking your nervous system into a state of high focus and low anxiety. And let's be honest, when's the last time you had that kind of combo during the day? Mainstream neuroscience refers to this as a low arousal attentional state. It's often seen in activities like meditation, deep reading, or, yes, listening to someone whisper slowly about neuroscience while you lie in bed, pretending not to overthink your to-do list. But here's where it gets funky. Your auditory system doesn't just hear whispers. It also tries to feel them. That's where your somatosensory cortex gets involved. It lights up like a cozy little Christmas village, especially in folks who are sensitive to ASMR. We'll get to that soon. It's like your brain is saying, "I can't quite place this sound. Is it coming from inside my head or brushing against my skin?" That ambiguity creates this eerie intimacy that's oddly comforting. Now here's a quirky little tidbit. There's a niche community online that believes whispers can unlock forgotten memories. Not through hypnosis or therapy, but through sound frequency. They record memory reactivation whispers, low volume, nostalgic phrases, hoping to tickle long-buried neural pathways. No strong evidence on that yet, but it's a deliciously strange idea. You might wonder, why doesn't every soft sound relax me like a whisper does? Great question. A dripping faucet can be quiet, but it's annoying. A squeaky fan? Distracting. The secret is in the cadence. Whispered speech follows the rhythm of natural language. It gives your brain something to follow, to ride like a wave. That rhythm, paired with low intensity, creates what some researchers call predictive relaxation. Your brain gets just enough to stay engaged, but not enough to start problem solving. This is where the debate kicks in. Cognitive psychologists still argue whether whispers calm us because they're quiet or because they cue a relationship dynamic, like a parent soothing a baby. Is it the sound itself? Or is it the social script your brain attaches to it? Some even suggest whispering works because it mimics internal dialogue. Ever notice that your inner voice rarely shouts? Let's toss in a classic study from the Journal of Cognitive Neuroscience. Researchers placed participants in fMRI scanners and played whispered versus spoken sentences. The whispered ones not only reduced amygdala activation, but they also increased activity in the medial prefrontal cortex, an area linked to self-reflection and empathy. That's right. Your brain doesn't just chill when it hears a whisper, it starts thinking about how it feels. Softly. And here's something beautifully ironic: whispering activates more brain areas than regular talking. Because it's harder to understand, your brain has to fill in the gaps. That requires memory, imagination, and even emotional forecasting. It's like your mind becomes part of the story, co-writing each line in real time. That's why you're still listening, long after your eyes are closed. Fringe psychologists, yes, they exist, and yes, they're often delightful, argue that whispering has a metaphysical quality. They claim it vibrates at a frequency that aligns with the theta state, that dreamy border between wake and sleep. Is it true? Maybe. Is it poetic? Definitely. But not everyone's brain responds the same way. People with sensory processing disorders, or hyperacusis, often find whispering disturbing. For them, the unpredictability of low-volume speech is stressful, not soothing. Their brains don't interpret soft equals safe. Instead, they interpret soft equals uncertain. So the whisper becomes an irritant rather than a balm. Still, for most people, the brain reacts to whispering with a gentle cascade of calming signals. Your parasympathetic nervous system, the same one responsible for digesting dinner and lowering your heart rate, begins to take the wheel. Your breathing slows. Your muscles start to unclench. And your brain waves? They gradually shift from beta, alert, to alpha, relaxed. That's the slow drift you feel even now, the one that makes the edges of your thoughts go a little soft. Remember back in the beginning, we talked about how whispering bypasses the fight or flight radar? Well, here's that idea coming full circle. Your auditory cortex, your prefrontal lobe, your thalamus, all these brain areas work together to say, let's lower the volume, everywhere. Whispers don't just talk to your ears. They talk to your nervous system. They send out little neurological love notes saying, hey, it's okay. You can stop clenching your jaw now. They even affect your vagus nerve, the big, bossy nerve that runs from your brain down to your stomach. Activating it helps reduce inflammation, regulate breathing, and even improve mood. And yes, whispers do that. Sneaky little healers. So next time someone tells you to just relax, maybe don't listen to them, unless they whisper it. You've now seen how a simple sound can slip through the locked doors of your busy mind, pull up a chair in your subconscious, and say, you don't need to do anything right now. And that's the whisper's power. You felt the whisper in your ears. You've watched your brain light up in gentle, curious ways. But now we turn inward, to the body, the subtle, unseen mechanics that flip you from go mode to okay, I could sleep mode. And trust me, it's more than just some soft talking and wishful yawns. It's biology at its finest. At the center of this transformation is your parasympathetic nervous system, often called your body's rest and digest mode. If the sympathetic nervous system is your inner warrior, revving your heart, widening your pupils, getting you ready to fight a bear or answer an awkward text, the parasympathetic is your inner monk. It slows things down, reduces heart rate, eases digestion, and tells your muscles, you've done enough today. So, what does whispering have to do with this? Everything. See, when you hear a whisper, you instinctively lower your own voice. Your breathing becomes shallower, slower. You match the speaker's rhythm, often without realizing it. This is vocal mirroring, and it's part of a broader neurological pattern called entrainment, when one system starts to sync up with another. In this case, your nervous system starts matching the calm pace of a whispered voice. The vagus nerve, the MVP again, is largely responsible for this shift. When activated, it drops your heart rate, improves digestion, and boosts that floating, zen-like feeling. The thing is, the vagus nerve responds beautifully to three things: slow breathing, soothing tones, and physical stillness. And whispering? It checks all three boxes. In one notable study from Stanford, participants who listened to whispered guided meditations had measurably higher vagal tone afterward, meaning their bodies were better at regulating stress and staying calm under pressure. Not bad for some soft talking, right? Now here's a weird one. In ancient Japan, Buddhist monks believed that the breath of whispering could be used to quiet both the body and the soul. They would whisper their chants, not just to avoid waking the temple, but because they believed whispering held more power than shouting. According to them, the more subtle the voice, the deeper the truth could go. Kind of poetic, no? Back to the science. When you activate your parasympathetic system, your cortisol levels, the infamous stress hormone, begin to drop. Your body shifts from survival mode to recovery mode. Muscles unclench. Blood flow returns to your digestive system. Your skin even warms up slightly. You're not just calmer, you're being physically rebalanced. But here's the part philosophers still argue about: is this a mechanical response or an emotional one? Are you calmed by the whisper because of its sensory texture? Or because it reminds you of comforting experiences, childhood lullabies, a parent soothing you, a partner murmuring half-asleep affection? Some researchers say it's neurological feedback. Others say it's straight-up nostalgia. Your body remembers what your mind has forgotten. The debate has teeth. There's a fascinating branch of interpersonal neurobiology that says your parasympathetic system can be activated socially, through perceived connection. In other words, your body doesn't just react to calmness, it borrows it from someone else. Whispering, then, becomes a kind of nervous system handshake. A soft, invisible signal saying, "We're safe. You can relax." Quirky tidbit time. In some medieval European medical texts, healers recommended whispering directly into a patient's left ear to calm them during seizures or fever dreams. Why the left ear? They believed it was closer to the heart, and yes, you just tilted your head a little thinking about that, didn't you? Let's talk breath. Whispering alters how you breathe, not just how you listen. When you whisper, your lungs don't push air with the same force. You're expelling just enough to produce sound, but not enough to disrupt the quiet. That limited airflow engages your diaphragm more gently, coaxing it into a slow rhythm. And when you hear someone whispering, your body starts to mimic that pace without even realizing it. This is huge. Slow breathing is a cornerstone of sleep prep. It's the basis of yoga, of mindfulness meditation, of box breathing techniques taught to Navy SEALs. Whispering gets you there without needing to think about it. No counting to 4. No post-it notes on the bathroom mirror. Just a voice saying soft things in a slow rhythm, and your body joining the party. Let's not forget your heart rate variability, or HRV. High HRV means your heart can adjust quickly to stress and calm. Whispering increases HRV, which isn't just great for sleep, it's great for long-term health. Athletes track it. Therapists measure it. And here you are, lying in the dark, casually improving yours by doing nothing but listening. And now, the weird science curveball. There's an experimental therapy in Europe called low-frequency vocal resonance, where practitioners whisper into specially designed echo chambers while clients lie inside them. The idea is that the body absorbs those frequencies like a massage for your nervous system. The science is debatable. The vibe? Immaculate. Still, let's not get carried away. Whispering isn't a magic bullet. It's not going to cancel your deadlines or delete your group chat. But it is a signal, one your body understands deeply. It's a whisper to your inside saying, "Not now. Not yet. Just rest. There are skeptics, of course. Some argue whispering only works if you're already predisposed to calmness. If your mind is racing, they say, even the softest voice won't cut through the chaos. Fair. But studies show that even anxious individuals experience a parasympathetic bump when exposed to gentle whispering, especially in repetitive, rhythmic formats. So maybe it's not a cure, but it's a start. So let's try something. Close your eyes for a second, and just listen. No pressure. Just presence. Feel your breath sinking. Notice your shoulders easing down. That subtle shift. That's your body handing the reins back to the part of you that knows how to rest. You're not escaping anything. You're just letting go, for now. And in that space, between wakefulness and dreams, your body begins to remember how to feel okay. Now we've moved from the brain to the body, but there's still something missing. That tingling sensation at the base of your skull when someone whispers just right, like they're standing too close behind you. It's not just comfort. It's not just calm. It's something electric. Tonight, you're brushing up against the odd, delightful realm of ASMR, autonomous sensory meridian response, and how it might just be the bridge between whispering and your most relaxed, childlike self. ASMR is that subtle shiver. Not cold. Not fear. A warmth that moves in waves, often starting near the scalp, drifting down the neck, sometimes all the way into your limbs. And for many people, whispering is the most reliable trigger. But why? What's so powerful about a voice dropped to a hush? Let's start with the basics. When someone whispers directly into your ears, especially using stereo sound or binaural recording, your brain interprets the proximity as intimacy. And intimacy, in the right context, equals safety. That sensation, coupled with gentle sounds like tapping, brushing, or page turning, stimulates a unique blend of neural activity. You're alert enough to notice, but relaxed enough to enjoy. ASMR activates regions like the nucleus accumbens, hello, pleasure center, and medial prefrontal cortex, which is associated with social cognition and empathy. Basically, your brain thinks it's having a personal moment with someone kind, someone focused entirely on you. You're not just listening, you're being looked after. In one landmark study, participants watching ASMR videos experienced reduced heart rates and increased skin conductance levels, a fancy way of saying their bodies relaxed while staying neurologically engaged. Like we mentioned earlier, that golden, low-arousal attentional state. A dreamy sweet spot between sleep and stimulation. So here's the juicy part, researchers have started to connect ASMR triggers with early childhood sensory bonding. Think of the moments when a caregiver whispered to you, gently brushed your hair, or sang a lullaby. These were formative, pre-verbal signals of affection and attention. Your brain coded them as safe, calm, connected. ASMR, many believe, taps back into those primal experiences. It's like hugging your nervous system. You probably won't know this, but some psychologists call ASMR a prosocial pseudo-interaction. That means your brain interprets the gentle whispering, the eye contact, the slow speech patterns as genuine social engagement, even when it's a pre-recorded YouTube video. And because your brain believes someone's taking care of you, it turns on the parasympathetic faucet and lets you melt into the moment. Now here's a quirky little twist. In a Fringe experiment from an ASMR art collective in Berlin, yep, that's a thing, participants lay in sensory tents while actors whispered nonsense syllables in rhythmic patterns. Some people reported feeling emotionally detoxed, while others claimed they could smell the voices. Smell the voices. Weird? Totally. Fascinating? Absolutely. But not everyone gets ASMR. About 20 to 30% of people report no tingling, no pleasure, just confusion. And psychologists still argue whether ASMR is a learned association or an innate sensitivity. Is it a neurological gift? Or just a well-developed connection to early sensory memories? Again, the jury's out. Philosophers still argue whether ASMR is an evolved mechanism for human bonding or just a highly specific sensory kink for the overstimulated modern mind. Still, even people who don't get the tingles often report emotional relaxation from ASMR content, especially whispered narratives. It's not just about the sparkly scalp chills. It's about the rhythm, the tone, the permission to slow down. And honestly, that's more than enough. Let's also talk about the personal attention phenomenon in ASMR. If you've ever watched one of those spa roleplay videos where someone whispers, "You're doing great, let me just brush your hair," you know what I mean. The brain lights up as if someone is actually caring for you in real time. It's like tricking your nervous system into a moment of emotional intimacy. That's the power of whispering again. It creates an illusion of closeness. A kind of emotional sleight of hand. And your brain, bless it, responds as if it's happening live. This is where things get philosophically interesting. Some theorists believe ASMR, especially whisper-focused ASMR, is part of a broader human yearning for safe submission. That sounds intense, but don't worry, it's not 50 Shades, it's more like nap time for your inner control freak. In a world where you're constantly responsible, in charge, alert, whispers tell you it's okay to not be those things. You get to be the listener. The receiver. The one being soothed. Let's toss in another bit of Fringe. There's an online hypothesis that ASMR whispering may activate mirror neurons, the cells in your brain that help you empathize with others. When you see someone relaxed and hear them speak softly, your brain imitates that state. It's like neural imitation therapy. And even though the science is still catching up, it aligns with what many people experience, a calming ripple effect, even through a screen. Now, a fun historical twist. The idea of sound-induced bliss isn't new. In 19th century spiritualism circles, mediums would often whisper messages from the other side during seances. People described feeling enveloped, drowsy, even touched. Whether it was divine or delusion, the reaction was real: relaxation, surrender, and an eerie sense of being cradled by sound. Modern ASMR whispering isn't that different, minus the ghosts. It's a voice in the dark that seems to know exactly how to reach you, without judgment, without effort. And your body, tired and wired, says, yes, this. Just this. There's even a therapeutic side emerging. Some therapists now incorporate ASMR elements, whispered affirmations, soft tonal guidance, into mindfulness sessions. It's not mainstream yet, but early results suggest that patients with anxiety and insomnia benefit from the layered sensory input. The whisper becomes a tool, a therapy you carry in your pocket. Or, more often, on your headphones at 2 a.m. So the next time you feel that soft fizz at the base of your skull, don't brush it off. That's your body responding to something ancient, something gentle. A whisper reminding you that being held doesn't always mean arms, it can mean sound. That being seen doesn't always mean eye contact, it can mean tone. And for tonight, all you need to do is listen. By now, you're no stranger to the personal magic of a whisper. But what if I told you whispering isn't just a bedroom thing or a YouTube trend? You're about to travel across time and culture, where soft voices have held power long before the age of ring lights and ASMR playlists. Whispering isn't a modern invention. It's ancient. It's ritualistic. And in many cultures, it's not just relaxing, it's sacred. Let's start in ancient Greece, where whispering was a critical part of temple rituals. In the healing sanctuary of Epidaurus, priests would whisper dreams into the ears of sleeping visitors, believing that whispered words would carry straight into the unconscious mind. These dream prescriptions were customized spiritual suggestions, early forms of hypnotherapy, really. You lay in sacred silence, someone leaned close, and with a whisper, your healing began. And it's not just Greece. Indigenous Siberian shamans often whispered prayers or invocations during healing ceremonies. The idea wasn't just to avoid loud noises, it was to signal intention. To separate sacred speech from everyday chatter. When the voice lowers, the world listens differently. So does your body. In many African oral traditions, whispers were used to pass on secret knowledge, stories not meant for the crowd, only for the initiated. Whispering wasn't just a volume choice. It was a rite of passage. You only heard the whispered stories if you'd earned the right to know them. That scarcity made the sound feel more potent, more personal. And that same psychology applies today. A whisper still feels like a gift. A privilege. Even in modern Japanese culture, whispering plays a subtle, respectful role. In Shinto rituals, soft tones are used when addressing spirits or deities. Not because the gods are hard of hearing, but because the whisper indicates reverence, an understanding that loudness doesn't equal power. Sometimes, power is in restraint. Let's take a playful detour. In French folklore, lovers who whispered into each other's left ear were thought to be binding their souls together. The left side again, interestingly, closer to the heart. Same pattern we saw in medieval medicine. And yep, you're definitely leaning slightly toward your left side now. Go ahead. It's tradition. Whispers have even been tools of rebellion. In Soviet-era Russia, people often whispered dissenting opinions only behind closed doors, knowing full well that louder voices could bring consequences. In that context, whispering became resistance. Not sleep-inducing, but identity-defining. A quiet survival strategy. This makes you wonder, is whispering relaxing because it's calm? Or because it has always been powerful? Maybe it's both. Anthropologists still debate whether whispering emerged from necessity, quiet communication during hunts, for instance, or from ritual. Was it a survival tool first, or a spiritual tool? Philosophers argue whether the reverence we feel when hearing a whisper is instinctual, or learned through cultural layering. Chicken, meat, egg. Here's an unusual one. In Maori traditions, certain songs were whispered into the ears of newborns, called Waiata Mati Mo, or sleep songs. But they weren't lullabies for babies to fall asleep to. They were identity imprints. The idea was that the child would carry those whispered melodies as part of their spiritual DNA. Not bad for a nightlight substitute. And whispering isn't just ceremonial, it's also therapeutic across cultures. In India, Ayurvedic practitioners have long used soft vocalizations and whispered mantras to reduce Vata, the dasha associated with anxiety and restlessness. According to them, calming the body's energy starts with calming its soundscape. Fast forward to the Middle East, where in Sufi mysticism, the whispered repetition of a holy name, dhikr, is used to transcend ego and quiet the self. Not shouted, not sung, whispered. Because in that softness, the soul can hear itself better. And yes, even in Western religious practice, whispers matter. Think of confession in Catholicism. Think of bedside prayers. Think of the soft hum of a choir at twilight. Whether the goal is forgiveness, clarity, or closure, the tone is low. Because when it's whispered, it feels more true. Let's jump continents. In some Amazonian tribes, healing chants are whispered directly onto the skin. The idea isn't just sound therapy, it's sound as touch. The breath behind the voice becomes part of the medicine. Honestly, that's not far from how modern ASMR creators use their breathy closeness, unintentionally echoing ancient wisdom through ring lights and condenser mics. And while all this might sound mystical, the psychology behind it is practical. Whispering feels intimate. And across every culture, intimacy has always been a shortcut to trust, to relaxation, to emotional grounding. Whether it's whispered folklore, whispered prayer, or whispered secrets, the outcome is the same. Your nervous system goes, ah. Someone is near. And they mean no harm. Now for a quirky one. In Icelandic parenting, there's an old superstition that babies should only be sung to in whispers until they're able to walk. Singing too loudly before then was believed to wake the spirit before the body is ready. Which sounds poetic until you realize it's also excellent developmental psychology. Gentle sound stimulates the brain without overwhelming it. Maybe ancient Icelanders didn't need EEGs to figure that one out. Let's be real, not all cultures use whispering for peace. In some, it's tied to secrecy, to manipulation, even to magic. Whispering spells. Whispering curses. Whispering behind backs. But even then, the theme stays the same. Whispering carries weight. Its very quietness demands attention. You can shout into the void and be ignored. But a whisper? People lean in. Just like you're doing now. That's the cultural thread running through all this. Whispering shrinks the world. It reduces the gap between speaker and listener. Between the past and the present. Between your anxious mind and the part of you that remembers how to feel safe. So tonight, as you lay there and listen to this modern ritual, a digital voice in the dark, know this: you're participating in something much older than your phone, older than podcasts, older even than language as we know it. You're listening like your ancestors did. Ears open. Mind soft. Breath slow. And the whisper, as always, is here to guide you home. You've wandered through sacred temples, healing chants, and intimate folklore, all bound by the power of a whisper. Now it's time to bring the candles down low and step into the fluorescent light of modern science. The sleep lab. Yes, the land of electrodes, white coats, and very uncomfortable beds, where whispering isn't just mystical or poetic. It's measurable. Let's be clear. The idea that whispering can help you sleep isn't just YouTube lore or bedtime intuition. Researchers have been poking at this phenomenon for a while now, though it's still dancing at the edge of mainstream acceptance. Clinical sleep studies are notoriously rigid, participants hooked to EEGs, their brainwaves monitored with more scrutiny than your last relationship. But here's what we know: whisper-induced sleep studies have shown promising patterns, even if they haven't made it to primetime medical textbooks yet. In one study at a university sleep center in the UK, researchers played a variety of audio tracks for insomniac participants: nature sounds, classical music, white noise, and whispered speech. The whispered speech, especially in slow, rhythmic tones, triggered faster sleep onset in 62% of participants. That's not just statistically significant, it's pillow-fluffing good news. Why? Because whispered speech seems to engage the theta brainwave state, a low-frequency state associated with drowsiness and early-stage sleep. When you hear slow, soft speech, your brain tends to sync up, entering a state that's kind of like a holding pattern before takeoff into dreamland. And yes, they've tried different kinds of whispers. Monotone ones, storytelling ones, even nonsensical babble, because this is science, and science is nothing if not extremely specific. Turns out, monotone whispered speech with predictable pauses was the most effective at reducing sleep latency. That's just a fancy way of saying how long it takes you to actually fall asleep. The fewer surprises in tone or rhythm, the faster the body gave in. It's not just about noise level. A whisper isn't the same thing as low volume. Your brain reacts differently to the texture of a whisper, the lack of vocal cord vibration, the breathy delivery, the closeness implied. That difference is processed not just in your auditory cortex, but in your insula, a region involved in emotional self-awareness. The whisper becomes a kind of internal experience. It doesn't just happen to your ears, it happens inside you. Now here's your quirky tidbit for this section. One sleep researcher at a lab in Canada tried an experiment where volunteers slept in rooms with whispering mannequins. Don't panic. These weren't horror movie mannequins. They were ambient audio speakers disguised as life-size figures. The idea? To simulate the psychological effect of being watched over. Strangely enough, some participants slept better. Others didn't sleep at all. Yeah, sleep psychology has its weird corners. Here's the thing: whisper therapy isn't exactly a medical treatment, yet. But it's being explored under umbrella terms like auditory sleep support and sensory relaxation techniques. In other words, science is still finding a name that doesn't sound like a spa package. But the early data is intriguing. Whispering as a sleep aid shows potential to reduce hyperarousal, a condition that plagues many insomniacs. When your brain won't turn off, when your heart won't slow down, and your body insists on scanning the room for non-existent threats, whispers seem to shortcut that loop. They pull you into the present moment, gently telling your nervous system, nothing's happening. Nothing has to happen. You can just let go. Here's a fun term you'll want to casually drop at brunch: hypnagogic modulation. It refers to anything that influences the moment between wakefulness and sleep. Whispering has been shown to enhance this transition in some people, helping them enter stage 1 sleep faster. That's the lightest sleep stage, where muscle activity starts to decline and slow eye movement kicks in, basically your brain dipping its toes into the dream pool. Let's not pretend it's all conclusive. Philosophers and scientists alike still argue whether whispering is truly effective or if it's just a form of placebo-induced relaxation, the result of people believing they should be relaxed, so they are. But even placebos have power. If the whisper works, does it matter why it works? Some labs are taking it even further. Biofeedback studies are being done where participants listen to whispering while connected to heart rate and breathing monitors. In one pilot project in the Netherlands, whisper-induced sessions led to lower cortisol spikes in people with generalized anxiety disorder. Is whispering the cure? No. But it might be a tool, a gentle first step into sleep for people who fear they've forgotten how. Let's zoom in on the experience. In clinical sleep environments, whispers are sometimes layered with binaural beats, audio patterns that create the illusion of movement inside your head. Think of it as sound walking in circles around your brain. When whispers are added, especially with directional microphones, the effect becomes immersive. You're no longer in a sterile lab. You're wrapped in sound, half floating, half sinking into that sweet limbo of early sleep. And now, for something oddly adorable, in one pediatric sleep study, children who listened to bedtime stories read in whispers by their own parents fell asleep faster and stayed asleep longer than when the same stories were read aloud in regular voices. The researchers noted that the children's eye movement slowed significantly within minutes of whisper exposure. In other words, the bedtime whisper is not just cozy, it's biologically effective. So, what's holding whispering back from becoming a full-blown clinical sleep therapy? Well, for one thing, it's hard to standardize. Everyone whispers differently. Some voices soothe, others might sound like they're trying too hard. Plus, relaxation isn't one size fits all. Some people are soothed by whispering. Others, especially those with sensory sensitivities, find it irritating or unsettling. Remember those mannequins? Yeah. Science has taste testers too. But whispering remains a promising piece of the puzzle, especially for people who want non-pharmaceutical sleep support. No pills. No side effects. Just sound. Breath. Presence. So, tonight, as you lie there listening, you might be doing more than winding down. You might be entering your own quiet experiment. Your brain, your breath, your heart rate, all participating in a delicate dance choreographed by sound. And the whisper? It's the rhythm guiding you gently, almost invisibly, toward rest. So far, we've explored how whispers affect your brain, your body, and even your cultural heritage. But now, we're going to zoom in on something incredibly specific, possibly the most human part of this entire equation. Tonight, you're going to uncover why whispering makes you trust someone almost instantly. Yes, even if they're a complete stranger whispering through your phone at 1 a.m., whispering isn't just sound, it's a signal. A deep, subconscious cue that says, "You're safe with me." Let's go back to your biology. When you hear someone whisper, especially in a calm, steady tone, your limbic system, the part of your brain responsible for emotional regulation, gets a hit of oxytocin. That's the same hormone released during hugging, hand-holding, and bonding moments. You're not touching anyone, and yet your brain is saying, "I like this. I feel close to this. I trust this." This effect is known in psychology as affiliative vocalization. It's the vocal equivalent of a gentle hand on your back. Not demanding. Not aggressive. Just present. These types of sounds, soft, low, rhythmic, are associated with non-threat signals in both human and animal communication. You can hear it in how a mother hums to her baby. Or how best friends lower their voices when they're about to spill something real. Let's throw in a mainstream psychology study from the University of Wisconsin. Researchers had participants listen to the same story told in two tones, one a calm whisper, and the other a standard speaking voice. Then, they were asked to rate the speaker's trustworthiness, warmth, and likability. Across the board, whispering won. Participants felt more emotionally connected to the whisperer, even though they'd never seen their face or interacted with them directly. The researchers suggested that lower vocal intensity increases perceived vulnerability. When someone whispers, they seem less guarded, less performative, more human. And when we perceive vulnerability in someone, we subconsciously feel safer around them. Why? Because if they're not a threat, we can afford to drop our own armor. Now for a fun, quirky detour. In some Scandinavian villages, there was once a tradition called nattespil, where lovers would sneak out at night to whisper secrets into each other's ears through the walls of their houses. It was considered more intimate than holding hands in public. If you could hear someone's whisper, you were hearing something meant for you. And only you. Modern psychology agrees. Whispering creates an illusion of exclusivity. Even in a crowded room, or on a busy podcast app, when someone whispers, your brain believes that message is just for you. It's not being broadcast. It's being delivered. And this intimacy through audio isn't just theoretical. It's biological. Remember your old pal the amygdala? That little almond-shaped blob that handles fear and threat detection? Well, studies show that whispering bypasses your amygdala's panic button. Because whispers lack sudden spikes in volume or pitch, they don't trigger the same red flags. Instead, they activate midline prefrontal regions, parts of the brain associated with empathy, memory, and yes, trust. It's not just about what's said, it's how it's said. Whispering slows language down, reduces vocal inflection, and removes the performative edge you often hear in louder speech. And your brain loves that. It interprets the whisper as intentional softness, someone trying not to alarm you. Someone giving you space. Here's a phrase you probably haven't heard before: acoustic intimacy threshold. It's the theoretical distance where a whisper can still be heard, but not by anyone else. Think of it like an invisible bubble. Inside that bubble, trust flourishes. Outside of it, you're just another voice in the crowd. Whispering pulls people into that bubble, even if you're half a world away, lying in bed, phone screen dimming as your eyes grow heavier. Now, whispering doesn't always build trust. Let's not pretend every hushed voice has good intentions. In horror films, whispering is often weaponized, used to unsettle you. But even then, the tension works because whispering is usually associated with closeness and care. It's the context flip that makes it creepy. In normal, everyday life, whispering still leans toward comfort and connection. And here's a cheeky little twist. In online dating studies, participants who described themselves as soft-spoken or who had audio messages with whispered tones were rated as more trustworthy, especially among people who already had anxiety about meeting new people. In other words, the whisper didn't just sound nice. It sounded safe. That safety doesn't just exist in romantic settings, either. Therapists sometimes use whisper-adjacent tones in trauma work, especially with clients who have PTSD. The idea is to reduce auditory stimulation and help the client stay grounded. And while there's still debate in clinical psychology about how much this helps versus traditional talk therapy, early feedback is overwhelmingly positive. People say it makes them feel less judged, more listened to, and held, without being touched. Philosophers still argue whether this perceived intimacy is innate or cultivated. Do you trust a whisper because you were rocked to sleep as a child with lullabies? Or does the trust come from the brain interpreting quiet tones as non-threatening, independent of experience? Maybe it's both. Maybe it's neither. Or maybe, as one researcher put it, the whisper is simply the voice stripped of armor. Let's not forget the role of mirror neurons again. When you hear a whisper, your brain often mimics the tone internally. You might find yourself breathing more softly, lowering your own inner monologue. This creates an internal feedback loop. They're calm, I'm calm, I feel connected. That's not just a feeling, it's neurobiology doing its thing. Now for something strange but charming. In a university in Italy, a psychology professor found that students retained more information during whispered lectures. Why? The class had to stay quiet to hear, so they leaned in. But beyond the mechanics, they also reported that the professor felt more human, more real, and more invested. That's the whisper effect at play, even in academic settings. So tonight, as you lie there, soaking in the softness of each word, you're not just listening to sound. You're building trust. Not just with me, but with yourself. Because your brain is finally lowering its shield, relaxing into the knowledge that nothing is being asked of you right now. There's no to-do list here. No action items. Just a voice, close and quiet, telling you it's okay to rest. And you believe it, because your biology wants to. Now, you've grown comfortable in the science, the history, and even the trust whispered words create. But tonight, we're stepping into slightly stranger territory. Because while whispers tend to calm most people, for a rare few, they do something entirely different. Something unexpected. Whispers don't soothe them. They confuse, irritate, or even frighten them. Yes, whispering doesn't always lead to serenity. For some, it triggers neurological oddities that are just as fascinating as they are mysterious. Imagine this: you're lying in bed, earbuds in, ASMR video queued up. The whisper begins, and instead of melting into sleep, your skin crawls. Your jaw tightens. Maybe you even feel like someone's watching you. Unsettling, right? This reaction isn't common, but it's real. And for psychologists, it opens up a curious window into how our brains handle sensory input differently. The most well-documented of these unusual responses is called misophonia, a condition where specific sounds, especially soft repetitive ones like chewing, tapping, or whispering, can trigger intense emotional reactions. Not annoyance. Not irritation. We're talking rage, disgust, anxiety. For someone with misophonia, whispering isn't relaxing, it's intrusive. Their amygdala reacts disproportionately, lighting up like it's under attack. The whisper doesn't signal peace. It signals unpredictability. Danger. And to them, it's like trying to sleep while someone's flicking your eardrum with a feather. Relentlessly. One mainstream psychology study from Duke University found that misophonia is linked to increased activity in the anterior insular cortex, the brain region involved in emotional regulation and interoception, your sense of what's happening inside your body. People with misophonia don't just hear sounds. They feel them, in their chest, in their jaw, in their breath. And unfortunately, whispers sometimes land on that trigger list. Quirky tidbit time. There's a very rare condition called auditory Charles Bonnet syndrome, where people with partial hearing loss begin to hear hallucinated voices or whispering that isn't there, like phantom audio. No, it's not schizophrenia. It's the brain trying to fill in missing data, and sometimes it fills the silence with soft speech. One patient even reported hearing a voice singing nursery rhymes in a whispery loop. Creepy? Yeah. But it shows just how desperate the brain is to make sense of sound, even when none is present. Let's pause for a second. If whispering can cause agitation in some people and hallucinations in others, does that mean it's bad? Not at all. It just reminds us that neurological diversity is real. That what's calming for one person might feel overwhelming or invasive to another. Your whisper might be someone else's foghorn. Now, there's also a phenomenon known as auditory pareidolia, where the brain perceives meaningful patterns or voices in random noise. Ever heard a whisper in the rustling leaves or a faint voice in the hum of a fan? That's pareidolia. Your brain looking for signal in static. In the dark, in the quiet, a whisper-shaped hole appears, and your mind fills it. Philosophers and cognitive scientists still argue whether this is an evolutionary adaptation, like hypervigilance in the absence of visual input, or just a byproduct of our pattern-seeking brains. Are we supposed to find whispers in the white noise? Or are we simply too imaginative for our own good? Let's add another layer. Schizotypal personality traits are sometimes linked with a heightened sensitivity to ambiguous auditory stimuli, like whispers that seem to come from nowhere. These individuals often report feeling a presence when hearing soft, disembodied speech, especially in the hypnagogic state just before sleep. The whisper becomes not just sound, but suggestion. Still, these reactions are the exception, not the rule. For most people, whispers bring calm. But even in these fringe cases, we learn something profound: whispering is not neutral. It's emotionally loaded. It carries weight. And depending on how your nervous system is wired, that weight can either settle you down or rattle your cage. There's also the psychological concept of proximity anxiety, a hypersensitivity to closeness. People who struggle with this might find whispering too intimate, too near. The sound simulates someone being physically close, breathing in your personal space. And for them, that nearness isn't soothing, it's suffocating. It's worth noting that cultural background also plays a role. In some high-stimulation environments, quiet tones can signal secrecy or suspicion. For example, in certain urban settings, a whisper might trigger a sense of unease, like someone's plotting. So again, context shapes perception. Now for a curveball, researchers at a tech lab in Seoul experimented with AI-generated whispering in smart assistants. Instead of the usual chipper robot voice, they programmed whispers for nighttime queries like, "What's the weather tomorrow?" The reaction? Mixed. Some users loved it. Others found it uncanny and unsettling, like a robot ghost lingering in their room. The uncanny valley isn't just visual. It's vocal, too. Even among ASMR fans, not all whispering is welcome. Certain voice types, pitch ranges, or accents can break the illusion of calm and create discomfort. Some even report that overly scripted whispers, the ones trying too hard to be relaxing, end up making them tense. It's a delicate line between soothing and forced intimacy. This opens the door to an interesting academic debate. Can whispering be too artificial to soothe? Is part of the relaxation effect tied to perceived authenticity? Do you need to believe the whisperer actually cares? Or does your brain just respond to the tone, regardless of intent? Therapists and audio designers are starting to dig into this. Some believe that the listener's mirror neurons pick up on subtle inconsistencies, forced tone, unnatural cadence, or poorly timed pauses, and that these misfires disrupt the relaxation flow. In other words, your nervous system can smell fake calm from a mile away. But there's hope. Whispering as a therapeutic tool is evolving. Researchers are learning how to tailor whisper-based interventions, using voiceprint analysis to personalize the pitch, cadence, and pacing based on an individual's neurological profile. It's early days, but imagine this, a whisper therapy app that adapts to your brain's unique rhythm, avoiding those jarring edges that trigger discomfort. So where does that leave you? Well, if you're one of the lucky ones who finds comfort in whispers, consider it a gift, an alignment between your biology and your environment. But if you don't, you're not broken. Your brain just sings a different lullaby. And trust me, there are other paths to calm. Either way, the whisper reveals something about you. It shines a light on your emotional landscape, your thresholds, your hidden sensitivities. That, in itself, is valuable. So tonight, if the whisper wraps around you like a blanket, enjoy it. And if it pokes at something tender, know you're not alone. There's more than one way to fall asleep. Alright, you've seen both the magic and the mystery of whispering, the comfort it brings, and the strange reactions it sometimes triggers. But tonight, let's zoom in on something a little deeper. Not psychological. Not neurological. We're going primal. Because beyond all the cultural rituals and digital triggers, your brain still responds to certain kinds of whispers like it's being spoken to by a loved one. And the reason? It's the sound of security. Let's get sensory. Close your eyes and imagine a soft whisper, not random, not rushed. It's low, steady, and slow, barely louder than your own breath. What's happening inside you? Your shoulders drop a little. Your eyes flutter. And, this part's important, your breathing starts to match the rhythm of the voice. That's not accidental. That's your nervous system syncing to a signal of safety. Whispers, especially the right kind, seem to mimic the maternal vocal frequency range. Researchers have found that many effective sleep whispers fall into the same vocal band that mothers instinctively use when soothing infants, around 250 to 500 Hz. These aren't just nice sounds. They're biologically optimized for calming a highly reactive nervous system. It's the same frequency you heard when you were still too small to understand words. Mainstream psychology backs this up. In early infancy studies, babies responded more positively to high proximity, low-volume voices, whispers, coos, shushes, than to regular speech. Their heart rates slowed, and their eye movements settled. The conclusion? Certain tones act as a safety signature in the brain. And once that signature is formed, it sticks around. That's why even as an adult, your brain still responds to those same vocal patterns with a full-body exhale. It's like your inner child is going, "Oh, I remember this. I know what this means. I'm okay." Let's throw in a wonderfully odd example. In some primate research labs, researchers observed that chimpanzee mothers use a form of whispering vocalization, not full calls, but quiet, breathy contact sounds, to soothe distressed infants. They don't make a big noise. They go quiet. Even in the wild, safety is often communicated in hushed tones. So it's not just a human thing. It's a mammalian thing. Here's something psychologists call the low-threat frequency response. Your brain and body are constantly scanning your environment for cues, sound, movement, tone, to decide if you're safe. Loud, sharp, unpredictable sounds? High alert. But low, soft, predictable ones? Your body reads those as non-threatening, and it shifts into rest mode without you lifting a finger. And this isn't about logic. You could be in a completely safe place, your bed, your couch, your favorite hotel. But if the noise around you doesn't fit the safety signature, your body won't settle. It's not enough to know you're safe. Your body has to feel it. That's what whispering offers, an auditory hug. A sound that slips past your thinking brain and talks directly to the part of you that keeps score, your autonomic nervous system. Now here's your quirky tidbit. In the early 20th century, there was a brief trend in Europe where parents were encouraged to whisper train their infants, not by talking to them, but by whispering positive phrases during naps. The belief was that even while asleep, the child's brain would internalize the sense of calm and familiarity. It didn't last long as a parenting fad, but the idea stuck in pop psychology, that whispering equals subconscious comfort. Of course, there's still debate. Philosophers and neurobiologists argue whether the soothing effect comes from acoustic familiarity, your brain recognizing a safe pattern, or social context, your brain assigning trust based on past experiences. Is it the sound itself? Or the story you attach to it? And while researchers still explore that, the reality remains, whispering mimics the sound of care. It creates proximity without pressure. You don't have to respond. You don't even have to be fully awake. You just have to hear it, and your nervous system does the rest. Let's talk about directionality. When a whisper is close, when it seems to come from just over your shoulder, or 1 inch from your ear, your brain processes it differently than ambient noise. Directional whispers trigger spatial awareness systems in your brain, like the posterior parietal cortex, which is involved in understanding where things are in relation to you. When you hear a whisper that close, your body believes there's someone right there beside you. And if the tone is calm, it thinks that person is safe. That's the secret sauce of ASMR whispers and late-night guided meditations. They don't just sound quiet. They sound close. They simulate physical safety without physical touch. And in a world where we often go entire days without genuine closeness, that auditory proximity is a balm. Let me paint a scene for you. You're lying in bed, your phone on the nightstand, the whisper in your headphones barely above a breath. You feel the warmth in your chest spread. Your limbs feel heavier. Why? Because your body thinks someone's watching over you. Not in a creepy way, just in a "you're not alone" kind of way. That's what whispering does. It simulates presence. And here's where things get even more interesting. In studies on trauma recovery, clinicians found that trauma survivors often responded positively to non-invasive vocal tones, especially whispered affirmations. They reported a sense of being cared for without being touched, which is critical for people with touch-related boundaries. Whispering became a bridge, a way back into safety, without crossing wires. Not everyone will feel this, of course. Some people need silence to sleep. Some people crave music, or the steady buzz of a fan. But if you're one of the many who lean into whispered voices, it may be because your nervous system is echoing something it learned a long time ago. Soft means safe. Slow means there's no threat. Close means comfort. That kind of auditory imprint is hard to override. And why would you want to? So tonight, as you lie in the dark, breathing in time with this voice, remember what's really happening. Your body is listening for danger, and finding none. Your brain is leaning into sound, and finding peace. You are, without doing anything, being whispered into a state of security. You've got nothing to fear here. Alright, you've traveled through science labs, ancient rituals, and the soft spaces inside your own nervous system. But let's shift gears just slightly, because tonight, you're going to peek inside your pocket. Or your nightstand drawer. Or that little digital world you carry everywhere. Yes, we're talking about technology. And more specifically, how tech has learned to whisper. You might not realize it, but the last few years have seen an explosion of whispering tech, apps, sleep gadgets, and audio devices all designed to replicate the effects of whispering. We're not just talking white noise or meditation bells anymore. We're talking soft, intimate voices designed to soothe you, tuck you in, and sometimes even lull you into unconsciousness. Let's start with what you know. ASMR apps like Tingles, Teaser, and Mindwell have built massive user bases just by doing one thing right, replicating that whisper close feeling. The top content? Whispered storytelling. Guided relaxation scripts. Affirmations said like secrets. These apps know that softness sells, but more than that, they know how to make a whisper feel real. That realism comes from binaural audio recording, a tech trick that simulates 3D space in sound. So instead of just hearing a whisper, you feel it moving. Left ear. Right ear. Behind your head. As if someone's circling you slowly, speaking directly to your skin. Creepy if done wrong. Magic if done right. Mainstream psychology has taken notice. In several studies, users of whisper-based audio apps reported increased melatonin levels after just 15 minutes of listening. That's your sleep hormone, by the way. The same one your body produces when the lights go down and your brain says, "We're done here." Tech-assisted whispering helps kickstart that signal, especially for people whose internal rhythms have been scrambled by stress or screens. But not all whispering tech is focused on sleep. Some apps use whispering for focus and anxiety management. Think of Calm or Headspace, which now include whisper-only meditations. The idea? Whispers don't just slow you down, they stop your mind from multitasking. You have to lean in, listen close. And in doing so, your attention gets funneled into a single soft stream. Now here's your quirky tidbit. In Tokyo, researchers developed a robotic pillow that whispers, lullabies and breathing cues. The pillow literally breathes beside you, expanding and contracting, and murmurs gentle encouragements like, "You're safe," and "Let go." Yeah. It's a little sci-fi. But trials showed that users fell asleep up to 40 stir when using the whisper pillow compared to a standard white noise machine. Let's take a moment to talk about AI-generated whispering. Voice synthesis is getting good. Scary good. Tools like 11 Labs, Google's WaveNet, and Apple's Siri upgrades now include whisper mode capabilities. These aren't just volume adjustments. They simulate the breath, the pauses, the natural texture of a real human whisper. The kind that dances across your ears without setting off any robot alert alarms. Philosophers and ethicists still argue whether this crosses a line. Is it ethical to let machines simulate intimacy? Is there something deceptive about a whisper that feels real, even though it was built from code? The academic jury is still out, but for now, your brain doesn't seem to care. If it sounds safe, it feels safe. Let's not forget smart speakers. Amazon Alexa and Google Nest now come with whisper modes. Ask Alexa to set a timer at 2 a.m., and she might answer back with a soft hush, like she's trying not to wake the baby. It's oddly comforting, and also oddly effective. In usability tests, whisper mode made users feel less guilty about late-night interactions. Because the tech wasn't shouting, it was adapting. And that adaptation is key. One of the emerging fields in sleep psychology is responsive audio therapy, where your devices don't just whisper at you, they listen, too. They monitor your breathing, your movements, and your noise levels. If you toss and turn, they respond with slower whispers. If you hold your breath in stress, they cue exhalation sounds. It's like having a sound-based sleep coach curled up inside your speaker. Let's add another layer. Some sleep tech platforms now allow for personalized voice uploads. That means you can record a loved one whispering affirmations or bedtime stories, and the app will play them back in rhythmic, sleep-inducing patterns. Imagine falling asleep to your partner's voice every night, even when they're out of town. Or your grandmother's bedtime stories, long after she's gone. It's part memory, part medicine. Of course, tech doesn't always get it right. There are plenty of apps and gadgets that try to replicate the whisper experience and end up in the uncanny valley. Too mechanical, too breathy, too, I'm an actor reading a script. You know the ones. The kind where the whisperer sounds like they're trying to sell you bath towels and enlightenment at the same time. Psychologists warn that forced softness doesn't work. If the whisper lacks authenticity, your brain picks it up instantly. It might still sound quiet, but it won't make you relax. That's why some developers now use vocal emotion mapping, technology that adjusts pitch, pacing, and breath patterns to simulate real emotional nuance. Basically, they're trying to teach machines how to care. Or at least how to sound like they care. Let's not forget the big debate: can tech-generated whispering replace human connection? No. It's a supplement, not a substitute. A tool, not a relationship. But for those moments when your mind is loud and your bed is empty, a whisper in your ear, real or synthetic, can still help you feel less alone. And here's the most beautiful part: your brain doesn't discriminate. It doesn't pause to check if the whisper came from a real person or a waveform generator. If it sounds calm, familiar, intimate, your nervous system responds. Breath slows. Muscles soften. Thoughts begin to float. So tonight, as you drift in and out of these softly spoken moments, remember this: the future of sleep might not be louder, brighter, faster. It might be quieter. Slower. More whisper than roar. And if your phone becomes your bedtime storyteller, that's okay. Because rest doesn't care where the voice comes from, only that it sounds like safety. You followed the whisper through your brain, your body, ancient rituals, and even your phone. But here's where we pull back the curtain a little. Because as with anything that feels good, anything that promises calm and sleep and sanctuary, science has some questions. Tonight, you're stepping into the world of academic debates, where sleep researchers, psychologists, and neurologists are asking, is whispering truly therapeutic, or just another cozy placebo? Let's start with what's not debated: people enjoy it. The testimonials, the user engagement, the 400 million view ASMR videos? That's real. But enjoyment doesn't always equal proven effectiveness. Just because you feel better doesn't mean the method itself has been clinically validated. So here's the core of the scientific tug-of-war. Is whispering inherently relaxing because of how it interacts with your sensory systems, or because you expect it to be? This is where placebo theory comes in. The idea that your beliefs about a thing are what actually create the effect. If you believe a whisper will calm you down, then it might. Not because of the whisper's physical properties, but because your brain is creating a chemical and emotional response based on expectation. Sounds disappointing? Maybe. But the placebo effect is powerful, and frankly, it doesn't make the results any less real. A major sleep study from a research group in the Netherlands attempted to control for this. They divided participants into 3 groups: one listened to whispered affirmations, another to whispered nonsense syllables, and the third to regular spoken dialogue. Interestingly, both whisper groups reported greater relaxation and sleepiness than the spoken group, even when the whispers were gibberish. That hints at something more than just belief. The form of the whisper seems to matter. But it's still tricky to prove. Whispering is hard to isolate in a lab. It comes with emotional baggage, cultural meanings, personal memories. All of those affect your response bias, your tendency to report what you think the researcher wants to hear. If you believe whispering is meant to be calming, you're more likely to say it was calming. That feedback loop makes it difficult for researchers to separate perception from mechanism. Philosophers still argue whether that distinction even matters. If whispering works because of the placebo effect, does that make it less real? Or is healing, by definition, anything that helps? The late psychiatrist Oliver Sacks once said, "There is no placebo effect. There are only effects." Not bad for a bedtime mantra, really. Now let's stir the pot further. Some cognitive scientists propose that whispering might not be inherently relaxing at all, that it could simply be a learned response. According to this theory, we've grown up associating whispers with bedtime, safety, lullabies, and nurturing. So when we hear one as an adult, our brain pulls out that old emotional file and says, "Oh yeah, this means sleep." It's called classical conditioning, the same process that makes your mouth water at the smell of popcorn or your heart rate spike at the sound of your alarm. Whispering may just be another sound your brain has connected with comfort. Not universal. Not biological. Just learned. And yet, there's pushback. Neurologists who've studied brain imaging during ASMR whisper exposure point to consistent patterns: activation of the medial prefrontal cortex, anterior cingulate cortex, and insula. These are not suggestible brain regions. They're involved in empathy, emotional regulation, and interoception. Whispering, in these scans, doesn't just trigger imagined feelings, it lights up pathways tied to real, physical change. Here's your quirky tidbit for the night. In one Fringe research project, participants were placed in flotation tanks, yes, those sensory deprivation pods, and exposed to recorded whispers through underwater speakers. Some reported spontaneous memories, emotional clarity, and in one case, a conversation with my childhood self. Again, probably not a double-blind study, but fascinating nonetheless. Still, skeptics argue the studies are too small, the data too interpretive. They want controls. They want repetition. They want peer-reviewed journals, not sleepy YouTubers whispering about chakras and cloud shapes. And they're not entirely wrong. The field needs more rigorous study. The potential is there, but science wants proof. The problem? You can't exactly hook someone up to a brain scanner every night before bed. The whispering experience is deeply personal, deeply internal. The very act of studying it changes it. Here's another layer. Neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, theorists suggest that whispering may bypass certain cognitive filters, making the listener more open to suggestion. That's why you'll find whispering used in hypnotherapy, guided affirmations, and even some marketing strategies. It's not magic, it's rhythm, cadence, and tone working on your subconscious when your analytical brain is sleepy. And yes, that opens ethical questions. Can whispering be used manipulatively? Can it convince someone of something they wouldn't otherwise believe? Possibly. But that's a question for another video. For tonight, we're staying in the soft, sleepy lane. So where does this leave us? Right in the middle of a gentle storm. On one side, scientists seeking hard proof. On the other, millions of people who whisper their way to sleep every night and couldn't care less about the fMRI data. And somewhere in between? You. Lying there, wondering if what you're feeling is real, or just suggestion. But maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the real magic of whispering isn't in the neurons it activates or the hormones it triggers. Maybe it's in the fact that it asks nothing of you. It doesn't push. It doesn't demand. It offers quiet, and lets you take from it whatever you need. Maybe the science will catch up someday. Maybe not. Either way, the whisper works. You've heard the whispering from others, through earbuds, across cultures, inside labs. But tonight, the voice turns inward. Because one of the most persistent whispers you'll ever hear doesn't come from someone else. It comes from you. That soft, continuous inner voice. The one narrating, commenting, second-guessing. Psychology has a lot to say about it. And it turns out, the voice inside your head often whispers, not shouts. Welcome to the world of inner speech, that quiet monologue happening all the time in your mind. It helps you plan, reflect, rehearse, even comfort yourself. And interestingly, for many people, this internal voice doesn't boom. It speaks in a hush. A tone closer to a whisper than a proclamation. The question is, why? Let's break it down. Your inner voice, sometimes called subvocalization, is often modeled on the voices you've heard most often during your formative years. For many, that includes whispered reassurances, bedtime stories, quiet corrections, and soft encouragements. Over time, your brain internalized those tones. They became part of your internal narration. So when you talk to yourself, especially when you're trying to calm down or work through something, your mind uses that same soft tone. The whisper. Mainstream psychology tells us that inner speech is a critical cognitive tool. It helps with emotional regulation, problem solving, even impulse control. When your brain whispers, "Just breathe, it's okay," that's not random. That's a learned strategy. And the softness? It serves a purpose. A whisper-toned inner voice doesn't trigger your stress response the way a harsh inner critic might. In fact, a recent study from the University of Toronto found that individuals with more soothing inner speech patterns reported lower baseline anxiety levels. Participants whose internal voice was calm, rhythmic, and quiet were better at emotional recovery after stress exposure. It's not just what your inner voice says, it's how it says it. Now for a strange little tidbit. In a 2019 psychology experiment, researchers asked participants to rate the volume and tone of their inner voice. About 40% said it sounded like a whisper, especially during emotionally charged moments or before sleep. That means your brain literally dials down its own noise to soothe itself. Like tucking itself in. Let's also talk about the dialogue side of inner speech. Sometimes, your inner voice talks back. It takes two sides in a mental argument, or plays out a future conversation. And again, those imagined voices often use whisper tones, particularly when rehearsing vulnerable or emotional moments. A confrontation, a confession, an apology. When it's high stakes in your mind, the volume goes down. Because, weirdly, your brain associates softness with seriousness. You lower your voice when it matters most, even to yourself. Philosophers still argue whether inner speech is the same as consciousness. Is the whisper in your mind you? Or just a function your brain performs? Some say it's the soundtrack of your identity. Others argue it's an illusion, a trick of cognition designed to make sense of thoughts. Either way, the voice is there. And it often speaks softly. Now here's where things get even more interesting. In therapy, clients are sometimes asked to vocalize their inner critic, to give it a voice and tone. And guess what? In many cases, people describe it as a whisper. Not loud. Not monstrous. But quiet, persistent, and cutting. That tells us something important. Whispers aren't always kind. Sometimes, your inner whisperer is also your saboteur. That's why retraining inner speech is a big part of cognitive behavioral therapy. Clients are taught to identify harmful inner monologues, and replace them with more compassionate, calm, and yes, often whispered affirmations. Like, you're trying your best. You're allowed to rest. You're still here. It's not just about changing the words, it's about changing the tone. Because your nervous system responds to softness, even when it's self-generated. And then there's hypnotherapy, where whispering is used not just for comfort, but for access. Therapists use a soft, slow cadence to guide clients into a relaxed, suggestible state. It's not magical, it's neurological. The quiet tone bypasses resistance, lets the critical brain quiet down, and lets a deeper voice emerge. Now, your quirky moment of the night. In one experimental writing workshop, participants were asked to write dialogue between themselves and their future self, but only in whispered tones. They had to whisper the words aloud as they typed. The result? More vulnerability. More honesty. Less posturing. One participant said, "I couldn't lie to myself while whispering. It felt like a confession. Try that sometime. It's weird, and strangely clarifying. But here's something truly beautiful. You can train your inner voice to whisper kinder things. Just like you can train your body to relax, or your breath to slow. It takes time. But by repeatedly exposing yourself to soft, supportive tones, through guided meditations, therapy, or whispered journaling, you begin to build a new default setting. Think of it like this: your brain has a vocal playlist. And if most of what it hears is loud, critical, or demanding, that's what it'll repeat internally. But if you feed it gentle sounds, calm affirmations, soothing whispers, eventually, your inner narrator will start to whisper differently. Softer. Kinder. More patient. There's even early research on inner whispering as a mindfulness technique. It's a practice where you narrate your thoughts in a soft inner voice, on purpose, to break cycles of rumination. So instead of, "Why did I say that?" on repeat, you whisper to yourself, "I made a mistake, and that's okay." Sounds simple. But in practice, it's powerful. And guess what? You're doing it now. You're listening to this whisper, and your own inner voice is adjusting to match it. That's called auditory mirroring, and it's one of the quiet superpowers of your brain. You don't just listen. You absorb. So tonight, the whisper is no longer just from me to you. It's becoming your own. A voice you carry when the lights go out. When the noise fades. When your thoughts start spinning. That whisper, soft, steady, low, is yours to shape. Yours to trust. And in time, it might just become your favorite sound. So far, you've seen the whisper's power to soothe your nerves, slow your breath, and even reshape the way you talk to yourself. But there's one more piece to this quiet puzzle, and it might surprise you. Tonight, you're going to learn how whispering doesn't just help you sleep. It might help you remember. Yes, whispering has a strange relationship with memory. Not in the dramatic, thunderclap of insight way. But in something softer, slower, more subtle. It lingers. It imprints. And under certain conditions, it helps you hold on to information better than normal speech. The science behind it? That's where things get interesting. Let's start with the basic idea of state-dependent memory. This is a well-documented psychological phenomenon where your brain is more likely to recall information when your current state matches the one you were in when you first learned it. If you studied while calm and quiet, you'll recall better in calm and quiet conditions. If you learned something in a state of low arousal, like right before sleep, your brain files it differently than if you were caffeinated and pacing the kitchen. Now imagine being whispered to while in that pre-sleep state. You're not fully alert. You're not completely gone. You're floating in a dreamy limbo, and your brain is gently taking notes. That's the hypnagogic zone, the twilight phase between wakefulness and sleep. Research has shown that the brain's theta waves, which dominate this phase, are particularly good for encoding subtle, emotionally charged experiences. And whispering, with its soft delivery and often emotionally resonant content, fits that bill perfectly. In one study from a cognitive neuroscience lab in Switzerland, participants were exposed to whispered vocabulary lessons before sleep. Compared to a control group who listened to regular spoken words, the whisper group showed significantly better retention the next morning. Their brains, already drifting toward dreamland, held on to those soft words like threads of a dream. Here's the quirky tidbit. A researcher in France designed an experiment where poetry was whispered to participants in a sleep study. Not read. Whispered. In half-light. The idea was to test how much emotional content, rhythm, and tone affect memory retention. The results? People remembered more lines when the poems were whispered, and reported feeling the lines more deeply, even if they couldn't recall the exact words. The memory was emotional, not just factual. So what's happening here? Why would a whisper stick when other sounds slide off? It comes down to emotional salience. Your brain prioritizes information it thinks matters. And whispered speech, because of its intimacy, slowness, and low frequency, feels like something important. Like a secret. A warning. or a promise. It gets flagged. Saved. Maybe not in full detail, but in essence. There's a concept called episodic encoding, where the context and mood around information becomes part of the memory itself. That's why you might remember a whispered goodnight or a bedtime story more vividly than anything someone screamed at you last week. The whisper didn't just say something, it became something. Philosophers and memory theorists still debate whether these soft memories are more fragile or more durable. Some argue that whisper-based memories fade faster because they're subtle and low stimulation. Others claim they linger longer because they bypass conscious resistance. They slip in while your guard is down. Like a seed planting itself quietly in soft soil. Let's go even deeper. When you hear a whisper, your hippocampus, the brain's memory librarian, activates differently than when you hear normal conversation. Imaging studies show less noise, more focus. The whisper doesn't compete with background sounds. It has your full attention. Even if you don't realize it. That's why whispered repetition, like in some guided meditations or ASMR roleplays, can feel so potent. Your brain doesn't just hear the phrase, "you're safe," once. It hears it again. And again. And again. Each time, softer. Each time, deeper. Until eventually, it doesn't feel like something you were told. It feels like something you already knew. Now let's bring this into your daily life. Ever tried whispering affirmations to yourself before bed? Not journaling them. Not saying them aloud in the mirror with motivational music blasting. Just whispering them. In the dark. Maybe even with your eyes closed. There's a reason it feels more real. More believable. Because your brain, in its sleepy, open state, lets the whisper in. Here's another odd discovery. Some actors and performers use whisper rehearsal techniques to memorize scripts. They whisper their lines slowly, almost ritualistically, to encode not just the words but the feeling behind them. It's called emotional imprinting. And it works. Even public speakers have started using whispered run-throughs to internalize their talks without triggering performance anxiety. And of course, whispering plays a huge role in memory recall therapy. In certain trauma processing techniques, therapists guide clients into a calm, near-sleep state and then use soft-spoken or whispered cues to help them retrieve specific memories. Not to relive them, but to reframe them, gently, and without judgment. But here's the thing, memory isn't just about storing facts. It's about storing feeling. And whispers are drenched in emotion. They wrap the moment in warmth, or secrecy, or softness. That's why you remember whispered goodnights from childhood. Or the first time someone told you, "I love you," in a voice barely above breath. Whispers make memories not because they shout, but because they sneak in through the quiet. Still, not all scientists are on board. Some argue that whisper-induced memory is more anecdotal than consistent. That it depends too much on personal association, emotional state, and even your mood that day. And yeah, they're right. It's not a guaranteed study hack. You probably shouldn't whisper your calculus homework and expect a miracle. But if you're trying to encode something gentle, a truth, an intention, a mantra, a memory of feeling safe, then a whisper might be the best container you've got. So tonight, as the words drift in one ear and swirl gently through your thoughts, don't try to hold on too tightly. Just notice what stays. What lingers. Because maybe it's not about remembering everything. Maybe it's about remembering enough to feel at peace. You followed the whisper across the contours of your memory, through your thoughts, your body, and even your phone. But now, it's time to turn toward the final stretch of this soft journey, where the whisper leaves language behind and starts to slip into the subconscious. Tonight, you're going to drift into dreamscapes and echoes, the shadowy space where whispered words bleed into your inner world, and become something else entirely. You see, once you fall asleep, your ears don't shut off. Your hearing continues quietly in the background, like a night watchman. And although your conscious mind may be off duty, your brain is still listening. Still processing. Still deciding what's important enough to hold on to, and what can safely melt into the dream. This is where things get wonderfully strange. Sleep researchers have found that low-frequency auditory input, like whispering, has the ability to subtly influence the content and emotional tone of dreams. Not control them, this isn't inception, but shape them. Like a gentle wind nudging the direction of a leaf. In one sleep study from Germany, participants were exposed to whispered suggestions just as they entered REM sleep. The whispers were calm phrases like, "You are floating," and "You are safe." The next morning, many participants reported dreams involving air, flight, or peaceful movement, without remembering the whispers themselves. The subconscious had taken the prompt and turned it into imagery. Magic? No. Just deep, drowsy neuroscience. This is part of a field known as targeted memory reactivation, or TMR. It's a technique where specific sounds or cues are played during sleep to enhance memory consolidation, emotional processing, or even dream content. And whispering, because it's soft and minimally disruptive, is one of the preferred vehicles. Let's bring in your quirky tidbit of the night. In Tibetan dream yoga, an ancient practice meant to increase awareness during sleep, practitioners whisper mantras or affirmations just before falling asleep. They believe the words ride the breath into the dream realm. Whether or not you believe in the spiritual side, the technique mirrors what we now know about TMR. A whisper at the edge of sleep has a way of slipping past the guard dog of consciousness and settling into deeper soil. Philosophers and dream theorists still argue whether dreams are a form of subconscious narrative making or emotional processing, or both. But what's consistent is that the sounds entering your ears as you drift off do not disappear. They echo. They transform. Sometimes, they become characters in your dream. Other times, they fade into the environment, a breeze, a hum, a voice in the distance. Ever had a dream where someone was whispering to you, but you couldn't quite make out the words? That's not coincidence. That's the real world and the dream world bumping into each other. Even in sleep, your brain seeks out familiarity. It craves softness. Predictability. That's why a whispered voice can influence a dream to feel safer, more coherent, or more emotionally neutral, even if the content is bizarre. Whispering smooths out the edges. There's even speculation that lucid dreaming, that halfway state where you're aware that you're dreaming, can be gently encouraged through whisper cues. Some dream researchers suggest recording soft affirmations like, "You are dreaming now," and playing them on loop at low volume during REM phases. For some, it works. For others, it simply deepens the dream without triggering lucidity. Either way, the whisper continues to serve its purpose, guiding, not demanding. Here's something curious: whispering before sleep may also impact your mood upon waking. In one small experiment, people who listened to whispered positive affirmations during sleep reported feeling calmer and more emotionally balanced in the morning, even if they couldn't consciously remember anything they heard. That's not magic. That's neuroplasticity, the brain subtly reshaping itself, even while you rest. Of course, not every whisper makes it through. Your brain is selective. It filters out noise that doesn't align with its state. Loud, jarring sounds might jolt you awake. But a whisper? It slides beneath the surface. Becomes part of the background. And eventually, part of the dream. This might explain why you sometimes wake up with an idea you didn't go to sleep with. Or a line of a song you haven't heard in years. Or a feeling, soft, persistent, hard to name. That's the echo of something whispered into your mind, whether from the outside or from yourself. And that leads us to the final, most delicate layer, dream symbolism. Whispering often shows up in dreams, even when you didn't hear any in real life. Why? Because whispering represents secrecy, intimacy, guidance, hidden knowledge. Your dreaming mind uses whispers the way it uses symbols, like open doors, floating stairs, or shifting skies. They don't speak to your logic. They speak to your sense of something just out of reach. Something sacred. In Jungian dream theory, whispering is often seen as the voice of the inner guide, the unconscious self reaching forward to comfort or advise the waking self. Whether you believe that or not, the metaphor still lands, the whisper as a message from somewhere deeper. somewhere quieter. So tonight, if you hear the whisper continue after the voice fades, don't be surprised. If you dream of someone close, someone kind, speaking just out of earshot, that's not strange. That's your brain taking what it's been given and turning it into something uniquely your own. You're not just falling asleep. You're falling inward. And the whisper? It's leading the way. And now, the whisper begins to fade. There's nothing left to understand tonight. No facts to retain. No concepts to organize. Just the soft echo of what you've heard, settling, like mist, into the spaces behind your eyes. Let everything slow now. Let your breath widen, stretching just a little longer between each inhale. Each exhale. No one's watching. No one's waiting. You've earned this stillness. Your limbs grow heavy, but your mind? Lighter than it's been all day. Floating in the quiet. Floating in the dark. There's a safety here, not in the absence of noise, but in the presence of care. Of softness. Of something willing to sit with you, quietly, until you drift. There's no need to listen anymore. The story is done. But its rhythm remains. A whisper that began outside of you, and ended somewhere within. Let your eyes close, if they haven't already. Let the muscles behind your cheeks relax. Let your thoughts unspool, not in urgency, but in peace. The kind of peace that doesn't need to be earned or explained. Tonight, nothing is required of you. Not one more task. Not one more thought. Just rest. Just breath. Just this whisper.